Okay, good afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for joining the meeting today. I'll call the meeting to order at 3 o'clock on Wednesday, June 1st, 2022. And now we'll move into committee member updates, and that's Constance Bibbs.
Thank you, Najma. At the last meeting, I did mention to everyone that we were holding a recruitment for the EEO program manager, and we've decided not to fill that at this time. And so in the meantime, the HR director, Brandy Hopkins, will be providing oversight to the EEO office. That is all of the committee member updates.
Thank you, Constance. Now we'll move into roll call, and we'll ask the EEO office to go through the roll.
Toby Morelli.
Here.
Linda Patrick.
Here.
Johanna Schick.
Here.
Naja Steger. Felicia Caballero.
Here.
Mike Roman.
Here.
Jordan Harless.
Here.
Kimberly Ann Turner. Jeffrey Waltkamp.
Here.
That concludes roll call.
Thank you. The minutes were sent out, so hopefully everyone had an opportunity to look that over. And so if everyone is okay with that, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll motion to approve.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. And now we'll move to self-introductions for any visitors in attendance. Do we have any visitors?
Brandy Hopkins. Oh, sorry. Oh, Francisco Martin.
Constance Bibbs, EEO office, Human Resources.
Rebecca Carroll.
Oriana Mahoney, Staff Development Coordinator, Employee Engagement Unit, Human Resources, San Joaquin County.
DJ Andreessen, DCSS.
Christopher Vos, DCSS.
And for those of you who might be online who did not chime in, please go ahead and type your name and your department in the chat, or your name and wherever you're from in the chat box, and we'll take note of that for the minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Constance. Okay, we'll move on to public comment. Do we have any public comment today? Hearing none, we'll move to Women's Committee Partnership. We have Oriana Mahoney online for that.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon. So I am going to discuss the Women's Committee, which is a body that has been around for a little while. It sounds like I have like an echo in the background, but I'm just going to power through it. The Women's Committee, we're recommending that San Joaquin County Human Resources Department transfer the facilitation and oversight of the San Joaquin County Women's Committee to the EEOAC. And part of the reason that we are looking to do that is because it really falls in line with the mission of the EEOAC. The goal is to have EEOAC members oversee the meetings and progress of the Women's Committee, and to have each member lead one of the various subcommittees on the Women's Committee. The EEOAC will determine whether or not you want your chair or vice chair to take ownership of the agenda and lead those meetings. But ultimately, the committee is something that really falls in line with some of the goals of the EEOAC. And we did have some discussion with the EEOAC committee members that outlined that they really wanted more to give in the community in their roles as committee members. And Human Resources has been holding the Women's Committee for about a year. It's been around now. And it really just makes the most sense for us to have it fall under the umbrella of the EEOAC. So that's part of the discussion today, is to determine whether you all would agree to take on the Women's Committee under the umbrella of the EEOAC. This document was sent out to you guys, but I do just want to go over a couple of things about the committee, and then I'm here to answer any questions that you may have about the committee. So all of our committees for the Women's Committee are held on the first Thursday of every month from 3 to 4:30 p.m. And we alternate between full committee and subcommittee structure. So this meeting coming up this Thursday actually is a full committee meeting. So all of the members in the Women's Committee will participate in that meeting. In the July, that will be a subcommittee structure. So there are different working groups within the larger committee that would meet every other month and then come back in those full months to give any reports out that they may be doing during that time. The committee members are listed here, but there is actually one more that we've recently added. So this meeting on Thursday will be Veronica Riley from Department of the Division of Child Support Service. It will be her first meeting in attendance to the Women's Committee meeting, but she is also one of the county staff, a voting committee member. So on the committee we have 2 board of supervisors, Supervisor Miller and Supervisor Boudoir. And then there are several county staff, typically made up of department heads, assistant department heads, higher level management in the organization. And just to give you all a quick little background, the Women's Committee was formed out of conversations regarding equitability in the workforce for San Joaquin County, and Supervisor Boudoir had put the charge on the human resources leadership, as well as Supervisor Miller and some others, individuals that he had a conversation with, to form this committee and try and advance some of the work on equality within San Joaquin County. The first meeting was held on March 4th, 2021, so just over a year old. There's a lot of work that has been done, but there is still so much to do. I think in that first year, it was really just forming the idea of what we want the committee to be. One of the things that we did in the very first meetings was we broke it down into working groups. So we created 5 different subcommittees that have various topics that they are charged with researching, bringing back information to the committee, and just really doing the work behind the scenes to ensure equality and equitability amongst staff in the county. And so those 5 subcommittees are broken down by data and demographics, budget analysis and resource allocation systematic metrics, mentorship and training programs, identify and analyze gender biases, and support services. There's also a brief little description of each of these underneath of that. And then we have a breakdown of which committee members are under which subcommittee. And the goal would be for EEOAC members to really help support those committee members. We had several human resources staff helping with some of the administrative functions of holding the meetings and facilitating, which has really used a lot of human resources in doing so. And so it just made a lot more sense for us to think about what area should take on this women's committee, and the EEOAC makes the most sense. And so we would be looking for to select into a subcommittee, and ultimately you would be the main individual holding that subcommittee work group based on which subcommittee you're put in or you choose into. And then whether you decide to have the chair or the vice chair holding the overall meetings, that would be something that you as a group make a decision on. Are there any questions? And did anybody have an opportunity to read through some of that literature?
So Oriana, when you say read through that literature, did you mean the one pager here that we have about? Oh, yes. So yes.
And are
I
there
like
any
the
questions?
idea. Are we giving our?
Okay.
I like the idea of being involved, and I'd be willing to be on a subcommittee.
I also support the concept of this committee coming under this committee's oversight. And I agree that a lot of our goals align nicely, would be a good fit. I would also be willing to serve on the subcommittee in whatever way the board has decided appropriate.
Great, thank you guys. Does anybody have any questions around it? We do have a meeting on Thursday that I can invite all of you to. We are introducing this to you guys first, and what will happen at the Women's Committee meeting on Thursday, we will discuss with them that we would be transferring their resources for administrative support from Human Resources to the EOAC. And I think they're probably going to be very excited about that idea as well, because I think it really helps to branch out their progress and make them a little more visible, allowing you as the EOAC to help support in that process.
Oriana, this is Johanna Schick. I think you just addressed my first question, which is, how does the Women's Committee feel about this potential transfer? It sounds like maybe there haven't been discussions, but you're not anticipating any concerns.
That is correct.
Okay. And then my second question is, I overall, I support the concept. I think it makes logical sense, but it did prompt me to think, well, how is it that we got focused on a women's committee, which is fine and well and wonderful, but as would be any number of other types of subcommittees that EEOAC has is interested in ensuring equity in. And so it just struck me as, isn't it interesting that women were focused on, but not, Asian Pacific Islanders or African Americans or, whatever, that how do we ensure equity for these other diverse groups? And I just wonder if you could fill in some background there.
Sure. So I can fill in brief background. Essentially, it was a conversation that I believe at the time Tori Salazar and Supervisor Villapuga were having around this topic of women. And he said, well, let's take a deeper dive and let's look into some of these questions that you have. And so it really was a vague approach, a meeting at one point where they decided let's really implement something and put some meat behind this. So I don't think that there was any intent to exclude or other areas of folks that we want to make sure that underserved communities are being represented in that way. And I think that this actually opens a door as well for the EOAC to really think about how broad they want to go by starting with this.
Right. Yeah, because I can see there might be a need for an LGBTQI, type of focus, or other kinds of things that it's like, okay, what there's all kinds of groups that are potentially and I know that is the focus of the EEO office, and they're tracking our statistics and policies and all that sort of thing, which is fabulous, and maybe we're already doing a fabulous job. But it just struck me that, interesting that we're focused on women, especially since the county seems to be overrepresented in women in general. So, it's just kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I think that you'll find once you start going to the women's committees, it's interesting once you dive into some of the subcommittee topics as well. While we might be heavily women, it's really interesting and fascinating to see some of the statistics even within that. And so I think that that's where the focus really started. There have been lots of conversations in the women's committee about should we broaden this, but I think that the consensus at the time was let's try and focus on one thing
Yeah.
and make some progress on it first. So handing it to the EOAC, I think that it will be up to you guys to really guide it where you want it to go. In its first year, it was very much, baby steps of what do we want this to be? What does this look like? Coming up with the mission and vision, how we want to hold the meetings, that sort of thing. So it was all very new in that first year. But now that it's being transferred over under the EOAC, I think that you will have an opportunity to make it what you all feel it needs to be.
Yeah. And I think the point of, kind of doing a pilot with a particular group is probably a good one, because I'm sure that we will learn a lot by, it's like anytime you do the first of anything, there's a learning curve. And so this kind of creates the opportunity to go through that learning, and then that may serve as foundation or potential template for future work. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yes, I agree with that sentiment that even though this is a women's committee, the statistics will speak for themselves, the research will speak for itself, and I think it could be used as a template for further study for this committee, for other, groups. When we talk about unconscious gender bias, we can find other biases that relate to race or any other subgroup. I think women, when I look at the statistics, even though they're well represented within the county, it seems as if this might give us some insight into the promotion opportunities or lack of promotion of women in certain fields. So I'm in agreement with doing the research and studying this group.
Yeah, and you will find that in some of the subcommittees, they've already started to dive into some of that information and what does that look like. So we might be, let's say 60, I don't know the exact numbers off my head, but let's say that we're 61% women, but only 30% women are in the top 5% of high up positions. So, there is a balance to look at in that. And so when you start to work with the Women's Committee, you'll be able to see all of the data that they've done already, any report outs that they've already completed. We'll make sure that we get that to you all, as well as you guys sort of taking the ball and running with it and doing what you want with the committee to make sure that it's in alignment with what the mission and vision is and the idea of that committee, as well as the mission and vision of EOAC to try and bring forward progress. So I think that it's a great marriage between the two.
I think this is important work too, because even though women are well represented, a gender pay gap still exists in America. And when we're talking about equitable and equal opportunities, that's something that we want to strive for in our county. A lot of places, the only kind of workplaces that really have equal pay for both genders are those that have transparent pay structures, like government entities, places like Delta College, where it's based on education, number of units, things like that. So I think that our county still has work to do in the area of gender equality, and certainly with regards to employment. Can you tell us a little bit more about the structure of your committee currently? I see that you guys have working groups. That's wonderful. Who currently makes and sets your agenda and leads your meetings? Has that been the HR staff?
It's been me, yes.
Okay.
So, and the HR staff. So the HR staff really holds the subcommittees. So each subcommittee has 1 to 2 human resources staff that helps to facilitate those subcommittees. I do the larger, the full committee meetings. So I set the agenda along with Brandy Hopkins. So we set the agenda together. I do the majority of the facilitation of that. One of the things that we try and keep on the agenda in the full committee meetings are any report outs that a subcommittee may have. So they might have a presentation of something. We've done surveys. One of the surveys really helped to inform some of the strategic goals for this year within the county. because the Women's Committee decided, let's do a survey and survey staff members community to see where their priorities lie. And so there were some really good things that have already come out of the Women's Committee. And it can go really far with given the right resource. And I think that you all are that right resource.
Great, thank you.
If I could just ask also, with the women being overrepresented, would it be possible to look at the ethnic groups and which ethnic groups are overrepresented so we can make it equitable that way?
There has been a lot of information. It's really, a lot of it comes from your EEOAC report, right? So you guys have all of that information already. Whatever we're reporting out to the Women's Committee, the majority of it has come from the census, as well as the EEOAC report, the EEO report, sorry, that comes out every other year, I believe it is. And so that data is already there, but we have given some presentations on that data. And when I give you guys the backup documentation from past meetings, there is an entire presentation that speaks to a lot of the demographics that you're asking about. So you can review that. It's a lot simpler than reading through the full EEO report. Really just a couple of slides broken down to give you sort of a basic idea of what those demographics are like. And it is broken down by race, gender, ethnicity, all the different demographic areas for that are in the initial demographics report that the demographics group held at one of the very first meetings.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments on this?
I did. This is Toby Morelli. Questions for Oriana. I just had a couple questions about the origins of the meeting and the appointments of the committee members. Is it a public committee that's listed? I didn't find anything on the clerk of the board's website with roster details and their mission statement. I reviewed the information that was given, and I do agree that definitely a lot of the goals, it looks like the Women's Committee would align with a lot of what the EEOAC currently already does in terms of protecting class of gender. I do also want to piggyback on Johanna's point about there are other groups as well that potentially down the line deserve a committee or some further research into why they're underrepresented. Currently we have underrepresented classes in this county that I don't believe there is a committee for, and that would also fall under the EEOAC. So I guess my question regards about the public nature of our committee, how we have a public agenda, and I just wasn't aware of this committee being formed, and I support it. I just didn't know much about it other than what we received. So if you could provide a little additional background on that, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. Great question, actually, Toby. Thank you for that. So this is not a public committee. Really, it is made up of a few, as you can see from the committee member roster, there's several department heads, some boards of supervisors, and either department heads, assistant department heads, or staff at a very high level staff. It was intended to be that way as we started to dive through information, not making it a public committee at the moment. If that's something that comes down the line eventually, I think that would be on you guys and the Women's Committee to make that decision on. But for now, it really was just to be held as an organizational review within the county. So there are no outside individuals. So I know that some of you on the EEOAC are not county staff. Everybody on the Women's Committee is county staff. So you would be the only individuals that aren't actually staff, but you do sit on a committee of the county, which would be the reason that you are eligible to participate in that particular committee. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it was just a question about moving forward. If this does, we do combine, is that something that we're going to put on our roster sheet, our information. So for new members that come on, that they're aware that potentially they would be involved in a subcommittee. It's at this point, you know, like I said, it's just organizational.
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So I think that exactly that. It would be something that you guys would have a dialogue with the Women's Committee as you start to advance the committee. The fact that we would be transferring over some of the responsibility, again, is really administrative. The Human Resources team, while we were there to support, really weren't the committee, right? We weren't members of the committee. We weren't active committee members. We were there to just facilitate and support. Whereas when you all join, it would be a very different type of involvement where you could and maybe consider part of, you may be committee members as well on the women's committee, whereas Human Resources, we were just there as administrative staff support. And you guys would have decision-making power the same way that everybody on that committee.
Oriana, this is Johanna again. So as I was listening to you, it suddenly occurred to me that I wasn't clear on whether or not the HR staff that are currently assigned to the subcommittees, whether they would remain on the subcommittee after the transfer to the EEOAC, or would it just be EEOAC members and then the non-HR staff that are listed?
Great question. So HR would essentially be removing the staff from the support role and really transferring it over to you all. It would probably take, you know, a meeting or two for that to be able to happen so that we can orient your team on it. And would always be there for any questions that you may have. I try to overemphasize the fact that you should always ask Human Resources before something is being done anyways. So we're always going to be sort of the partners in the background. But we would be supporting the way that we're supporting now. We would be transferring all of that over to the EEOAC.
So then HR staff would not be in attendance at those meetings, is that correct?
That is correct. I am not positive as to whether or not there would be at least one staff support that hangs on just to be able to support in those larger meetings. That I'm not sure of, but that could be something that you all request as well. So how you want to build out that.
Yeah, because it's just a different level of involvement. If there are still HR staff that, you know, that's a different level of potential work and involvement for the EEOC members versus if, you know, HR is kind of taking a hands-off approach once that transfer is made. So it's just, I think it's just important to be clear so we know what we're taking on. So thank you.
Yes, agreed. Yeah, no, thank you for making that distinction because it will make a difference. There is work that will be involved that you would be doing that you wouldn't traditionally be having had done on this committee before. By taking ownership of this women's committee, you really are leading that.
I have a question. Oriana, have we accounted for what happens as EEOAC members term out of their commitment to this particular committee?
I think it would really just, you know, as individuals term out, you would bring individuals on, and then you would just onboard and orient them to the same process. I think that Toby was right when he said we would need to make sure that members trying to join the EEOAC would need to be aware that they would also be responsible for a subcommittee within.
No, this is one that I ordered. Yeah, so.
That is
Yeah.
that is an important.
Excuse me,
Oh,
Oriana.
I ordered that too.
Oriana, can you hold on for just a moment? If you're not speaking, can you please mute your phone?
Yeah, I'm going to mute everybody, I think.
Thank you.
You don't have to worry about tipping over as long as you're not.
Okay. Let's see. Hopefully you guys are able to hear me still. Can I get a thumbs up? Can I see anybody with the thumbs up? Can you guys hear me still? Okay, good. Like now it's so quiet. So, yeah, we would, we would essentially want to include that, right? And one of the next action steps is to figure out what we want to put on that orientation video. And this obviously would be one of those things that we want to make sure to add onto there, because this is an added responsibility as being an EEOAC member.
Thank you, Oriana. That answered a question I had, so Joanna covered it as well. But again, going toward just the full transparency of this. So the Women's Committee, if this is adopted, it'd be under like our discretion, or I think the language you used was we would lead the various subcommittee, but the Women's Committee would remain, and we as members would just become part of their committee as an EEOC member. The committees are separate but work together, so they will remain, like they're not becoming part of our committee, we're really becoming part of theirs and facilitating it and running administrative.
It would actually more think about it that they're falling under the EEOAC. So the EEOAC would really be leading the charge, and they would be sort of a task force from the EEOAC considered this women's committee.
And then we'd be on their subcommittees.
Correct.
Right.
And
But then also
your chair or vice chair would be heading the meeting.
setting the agenda and attending the meetings and then any administrative.
Exactly.
Okay, thank you.
Exactly.
So I have
Any other
an additional
questions, or
question. Yes, as I look at the 5 subcommittees, and the first one, data and demographics, and it says analyze, review, and support the full committee with data. I do have a question around gathering the data. As a person who is not an employee of the county, having access to the data that I would need, how do I collect that, especially if HR will soon have a hands-off approach? How will the committee receive this data? Who will collect it?
So great questions. I think that in those situations, there's definitely going to be times where you're going to need to reach out and partner either with somebody from human resources or other departments to get the data that you need to be able to present, and not just data, but key topics on certain areas that each of these subcommittees are going to be working on. The data and demographics really was one of those teams that initially it was just myself and Brandy, and we had 2 other staff members, Tammy Kuska, and we wanted to make sure that we had all of the information to be able to give in that initial data and demographics. But where we were pulling some of that from was, like I said, the census and the EEO report that you already all have access to. If there's other data or information that you would need from us, it would just be simply requesting support from Committee and Human Resources for us to be able to dig up that data. So while we might take a hands-off approach to the meeting structure and support, we're not taking ourselves away from being able to support the progress of either EOAC or Women's Committee, right? So we'll always be there to be able to help support. And in those situations, whoever, let's just say that Ruby is on the data and demographics, we would reach out to myself or Brandy and say, hey, some support from HR individual, and Brandy might say, okay, I'm going to have constant work on this with your team. I'll have her reach out to you guys in that way. So you'll still always have human resources support to get information. We're just not going to be supporting the meeting with every piece of information moving forward.
Thank you.
Great questions, though, everybody.
Yeah, that was a great conversation. Thank you, Oriana. If you want to go ahead and go right into the EEOAC welcome video, which is next on the agenda. Oh,
Perfect.
I'm sorry.
Okay, and so I just want
We need a motion.
Do we?
Oh,
yes. I was just going to say.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So we, excuse me.
It's okay.
So I will entertain a motion for us to, as the EEOAC, to have oversight over the Women's Committee and with the knowledge of what was discussed as far as our commitment to that committee. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? We have a motion.
I'll second that.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'm opposing, actually.
Okay, we have,
This is Felicia Caballero, and I do oppose this. And the only concern that I have with it is we are working on our own committee of the EEOC and trying to create and define our roles and how we can better serve the community. And I know that we have a long list of our own projects and agendas that we want to work on. And I'm not sure that we have the capacity to oversee an umbrella, be the umbrella of a subcommittee. That's just my concern. And I want to make sure that we're able to fully commit to being able to do both correctly and be able to provide our full when we're not quite sure how we're going to function fully into the EEOAC. And so those are just my concerns with it.
so I have a question. Are we able to discuss a longer transition as opposed to just stepping in and having this oversight?
Absolutely.
And would that be more appropriate?
Yeah, I would agree with that one, as long as we had a longer time frame to be able to move from hours and then gradually move into or take on and oversee the direction of the women's. Yes, I agree.
So then maybe an amended motion with a time frame is kind of what you're looking for? What would be a reasonable time frame, do you think?
We haven't even started our own stuff yet, so I'm not quite sure what would seem reasonable.
2024?
Yeah, maybe.
Point of clarification, are we supposed to follow Robert's Rules of Orders to run this meeting? I'm just, okay.
So we have a motion that passed, is the problem.
Yeah, technically we do.
So the motion passed.
Well, we
Yeah.
didn't ask if there were any abstentions, but I think we had enough ayes. Did we?
Right, and I don't know what Robert's Rules of Order says in terms of if you want to undo a motion that passed. I don't know what it says.
You know, I don't know that either. I just know that we should have had like the counter discussion before we had the motion. Like, I don't even know if we're allowed to technically discuss once there's a motion on the floor.
All right, so we'll do it the right way. So the motion passed, and I believe that the way it was presented, that there still could be opportunity for conversation for that transition, Oriana, and I'd be looking to you to see if we could have that conversation about maybe taking our time just so that we're very intentional and like Felicia said, making sure that we're solid and that we know what our plan is before we try to take something else on to make sure that we're successful at it.
All right, great. Yeah, I'm definitely open to have those conversations.
Okay, thank you. And so if we can move on to the video now.
Yes, so in this conversation, it's really just trying to have a discussion on the orientation topics. So we had discussed having an orientation for new committee members. And this conversation is around what types of topics did you all want to see in an orientation video so that we can distribute topics to each of you and potentially have you on screen to be able to create that welcome video, that orientation video for EEOAC. Then we talked about being able to post that on the main sjgov.org website as well upon its completion. So really this conversation is what topics you all want to see in an orientation video as a new committee member. What do you think is important for people to know? Or as members of the community, what do you think it's important to know? Or as an employee, what do you think that it's important for them to know? So really, this is just roundtable discussion on topics you all want to see in an orientation video.
I think it would be good to give a description of each position and what that entails.
Do you mean when you say position, are you referring to committee member position?
Chair, a committee member position, right? If you're the chair, what the expectation is, the vice chair and such.
I would
I'm
agree.
taking
Something
notes
that
on this too.
something that shows the level of commitment that's going to be required would be helpful.
This is an obvious one, but you know, what is our purpose? What are we here to achieve? What's our mission? Last meeting, I think, Naja brought up, you know, what's our vision? So that people walk in with a clear sense of why we're here and what our purpose is and what our authority is.
Mm.
Hi, Oriana, it's Toby again.
Anything?
I would look to you, what you've done with the new employee orientation. You know, a lot of us maybe work for the county or another government agency, but that's not always the case on this community. We have at-large representatives in the community that may not be aware of San Joaquin County's government organization structure, things like our pay scale, our merit system go a long ways when we talk about equal pay. You know, we have a step system. Things like that could go a long way so that people that are unaware of our organization have an overview of it, something general like you do in NEO, as well as Rule 20. Our diversity inclusion training is really good, going over what the county rules are for the EOAC plan, the EO plan, how we try to address underrepresentation, you know, the Rule 20 complaint process. I think that would be important for everyone to learn, especially being on this committee, whether you're not a county employee or not. Because again, we do hear about, through our EEO program manager report, these complaints that do come through the system. And I know we're always looking at ways to minimize those complaints. We talked about getting trainings. And so I think for a new welcome video for the EOAC, it would give them a brief overview, kind of our organizational structure like you're doing in the new employee orientation.
I know that one thing I struggled with when I, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
When I was new on the committee, I really hungered for some sort of a schedule of events so I would know what to anticipate when, like how, you know, when does the EEO report come out? And, you know, is there something we do every January or every March or whatever? So some sort of a schedule of events of the reporting and the kind of work that the committee does. So I had some sense of the rhythm and of the work and what to expect when.
Thank you for that. I know that that's something that we're currently working on for you all to just have moving forward. I don't know if we would necessarily want that in an orientation video, but maybe just alluding to the fact that there are certain things that happen on a continual basis and would get information as in joining would get on joining you would get this information so that you have sort of an idea or guideline of what each year would look like.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's a great one of the things. Going back to Toby, you named that the organizational structure was a good thing to have, but I think that if we're going to do that, we might want to think about doing it in two different versions. So there is, what does it mean to be a county government, but also as far as the structure of the committee itself, right? So where do EEO coordinators fall into place? And then we have you all as committee members on the advisory committee. There's also the EEO unit within the Human Resources Department, right? So more so, from what I was hearing, it sounded like you're looking for both of those things, right? One that's just like, this is the county, right? Like the little, there's a bill thing back in the day. So something like that with county and the whole structure where, 24, 26 different departments, 7,500 employees, and then something that speaks specifically to the county, the EEOAC structure and what that little nucleus looks like. Was that correct or accurate?
Yes, absolutely. Because again, our advisory committee really could speak to just our board of supervisors. We could put out a public statement, but we have no, say over private businesses in San Joaquin County, for instance. So, but this is a advisory committee to the board of supervisors. Like you said, there are other divisions. There's departmental coordinators all the way down to every department. And I think overviews like that would give new committee members an idea of our organization and all the inner workings of it.
Yeah, this is Linda. I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with that. Also, when I first joined the committee, I've been on the committee over a year, but I feel like I'm still a new member of the committee because this is my first time seeing the other members of the committee. But even if we had been able to meet in person, as a new member, sometimes it takes a minute to be able to identify and recognize the different members, especially those members who've been around a while. So featuring the board members, the committee members on that video, I think will be helpful to a new member so that they can identify them. Just a little blurb about who they are, a little background, a picture or something, I think would be helpful as an introduction to a new member. And as Toby said, the overview of the organization. Also, I wasn't clear on the interaction between the Board of Supervisors and this committee because our mission says that, that we advise the board, and I'm still wondering, how do we do that advising? So that relationship between the Board of Supervisors and the relationship between this advisory committee and the EEO department and HR department, and the support that they give, I think would be helpful to a new member.
Yeah, thank you. That's so I have, how does the Board of Supervisor, EEOAC, EEO department, and HR interact? So I think that is something we might want to have in that video. One of the things that I would say about identifying and recognizing, featuring the members themselves, I personally would suggest that be done separately. So by that I mean, last time that we met, I talked about making the EEOAC more visible on a website, having your own web page for EEOAC, and to put the little picture in the bio on there. I wouldn't put it in the video because you don't want to have to constantly update a video if you have new members coming in and leaving. So you do want to keep your video somewhat generic with high-level information, but still having a space for that. So I 100% agree. You should be able to click on a button and go to the EEOAC webpage and see your photo and get a little bio about you. So I do think that is important, but we should have the video as something that would be long-lasting, right?
Thank you.
So I think what you're saying is the video could point to those other resources that are more nimbly updated. Right. So the video can accomplish that by just pointing to the website, saying, to meet your other EEOC members, go to this. Yeah. Okay. Got it.
Anything else you guys feel is really important to have on there? So I'm just going to read through really quickly what we have. We have description of each position, so the committee member positions, level of commitment that is required, mission, vision, goal, purpose, and authority, organizational structure, some things like the STEP system, just a higher level overview of county government, and then understanding of the Rule 20 complaint process, a description that really kind of details out a little bit more of what the EEO plan is and how often it's done and what's involved in it, a schedule of events that we would talk, again, we would just talk about the fact that on appointment, you would get the schedule of events. And then what does the advisory committee look like? And then identifying and recognizing and featuring the members, which we would again point to where that is. And then how do the Board of Supervisors, EEOAC, EEO department, HR, and the EEO coordinators really interact, and what that organizational structure looks like within that piece. And then the video would just point to some of those other things on the website. Is there anything else you guys feel we're missing?
Just one, I have one last question. So if we do think of things later, are we able to still submit that, or?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that we want to do on this is that we want to just get an idea so that we could start to build out scripts. And what we may be doing is, if you heard of a topic, oh, are you guys able to hear me? Can I get a thumbs up if you can hear me? Okay, good. I'm getting some quirky stuff on my screen. If there's a topic that we talked about that you feel passionate about and you're interested in helping to build out that script for that piece, the goal would be at your next EEOAC meeting to have in your packet some of the scripts for some of these topics where you can all review it, go in, change it, so that we can really speak to things that make sense. And then from there, it would be you all selecting which topic you want to be able to be recorded talking about. And so we want to build out scripts for all of these different topics. And so if there is something that you feel personally passionate about, then you can send me an email and just say, I want to talk about the EEO plan, or I'm really interested in talking about the organizational structure, or whatever it is. Let me know and we'll start to build out that script, and you can have your input on that script.
Thank you, Oriana. So
That's
if we want
all
to
I have
go ahead
for
and.
that.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is old business. And Constance is going to give us a plan update.
I just wanted to give you a quick update on the progress of the EEO plan. It is currently we're currently in the process of drafting that. Thank you, everyone who provided feedback to our office so that we could try to look at that and incorporate it into the new draft for the 2022-2024 fiscal year. And so right now we're reviewing that information, drafting, and waiting for the end of the year, the fiscal year, June 30th, to happen, so that we can then run all of the numbers that we use to do our comparison against the census data. And hopefully, keeping our fingers crossed, we'll have the 2020 data. I do know that the last time I looked, they did have the data available for the years 2014 through 2018 that we need, but I was not able to find the 2000 all the way out to 2020. But we will have an updated report using new statistical data from the census. So what we do plan to do is send a tracked changes version out to this committee. The date we have proposed for that is July 18th, 2022. Everyone should receive a copy, and at that time, we'll be asking you to review it and provide any additional feedback that you have based on the current information versus what we had before. And we'll go ahead and review that feedback, get feedback from HR administration, and the plan is to have a completed final draft ready to be presented to you for review and recommendations and approval at the August 3rd meeting. And once we receive that approval at that meeting, we plan to submit it to the board and on September 20th of 2022. And that is the update on the EEO plan. Is there any questions?
I had a question, not directly to the plan, but would it be possible for us to have potentially like a subcommittee to go over the plan and make recommendations so that we would have had it for this first request for the recommendations? So meaning for next time, can we set up a committee now to start working for next time?
Do whatever you want to do.
Oh, okay.
I think that's a good idea. And so whatever you're.
So yes, so I'd like to have a committee, and I'm one. So hopefully someone else would like to join and be a part of that, and just kind of to go through it a little, dig a little deeper and really give some intentional thought to how it can help us to accomplish our goal of the, equitable employment and just all of the different categories that we touched on. I think in a smaller setting, we might be able to really impact that. So I guess I'm asking for volunteers.
Linda Patrick.
So Linda will be also working on that. And then if you're not wanting to join now, just know that the invitation is open because we are a diverse group. So it makes sense that we would have a few people on there to speak into that space.
I think that's an excellent idea, Naja. And I think that by doing that, I think we'll see, maybe something a lot more meaningful in that report. So thank you for suggesting that.
Constance, I just had a quick question. Just to clarify, we will be using the current census data from 2020 for our current EEO plan?
We will be using the most up-to-date that is available.
Okay.
And we're hoping that it is the 2020. At my most recent check of the data, the only information that was available was 2014 to 2018, that 5-year period. I'm hoping that at least by June 30th, we will have 2016 through 2020.
And then what was the date for the projected date for the board letter? So you said September.
The presentation to the Board of Supervisors is September 20th, 2022.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
When you submit that to the board, should any of the of this body be there as well? I don't think I've ever seen it presented to the board, so I was just wondering if that matters.
It does matter. I think that it's always great. It is according to the duties of this particular committee, it says that you do support our office in, preparing that and providing feedback to us and things of that nature. And so to see it to the end, which includes being there to support the presentation of it, I think that's always a good idea. Of course, I don't know as far as who'll be able to get in there or do whatever, but certainly if the opportunity is available, that's always an option. And we'll be notifying you of if it, for sure at the August meeting. And at that time, your committee, might decide that maybe certain people will go and represent, represent for support at the meeting, or maybe everyone will show up to see it. The Director of Human Resources is the one who will be presenting it at the meeting. And I believe that, and I'm not certain, I believe that there will only be a presentation if they're directed to give a presentation, but certainly it will be submitted to be approved at that meeting.
Thank you. So that concludes the EEO plan update. We'll move on to new business, which Constance will share with us on the Diversity Luncheon.
So the Diversity Luncheon is, as you know, it's always been our biggest event of the year. It's the only event, I think, in this county that brings over 400 people together to celebrate everyone in the county, all of its employees. And so we haven't had it for 2 years due to the pandemic. And we were looking, based on the feedback from this group, we were looking to try to see if we could hold it this year. Due to the current climate and there still being concerns out there about coming together and, limitations on people, we don't see that it is going to be a possibility to bring the group together. Again, to bring everyone in the county together, but we do want to look at alternatives, and we're we want the group to consider virtual types of alternatives, and so that is something that we want to put it out there for you to possibly form a subcommittee to look at different ideas. I know that last year when we were considering doing something, we met in the sake of time, a group of us met, and Oriana did come up with some fabulous ideas. And so if the group does decide to form a subcommittee, I would certainly recommend that you look to some of the ideas that she suggested. And for last year, I think that they could easily be implemented this year. And so that's kind of where we stand. I think it's now up to the committee to decide what it is you actually want to do in order to celebrate diversity, respect, and inclusion here in the county for this year and moving forward.
Thank you, Constance. Yeah, that sounds, I know we've all been missing the Diversity Luncheon. I have anyway, or just the event itself, because I've been wanting to recognize someone for a couple of years. But so yeah, I think so. Right now, we need to decide. I would love to be on a committee and hear some more or rehear some of Oriana's thoughts, but I do feel strongly that we should do something, and I think people are missing that. So I'm good with a virtual and just making it exciting, but at least something.
Right. So you guys do need to form a committee so that those of you who are interested, and this is your only time to kind of meet as a group to determine who's going to take that on. It certainly doesn't mean that you couldn't, bring others into help on it, but we need to know who's going to, kind of come together and, flesh out the ideas and all of that. And, certainly our office is here to serve as a resource for any questions on how we can be of assistance. And like I said, Oriana had some fabulous ideas that could be implemented and could be implemented by the fall if we wanted to continue to keep the same kind of time period of time where we typically would have the luncheon.
Absolutely.
So if I could just clarify the scope of this subcommittee's work, it would be that they're to review the various different options and bring a proposal and recommendation back to the EEOAC for consideration. Is that correct?
At the August meeting.
At the August meeting. Okay.
Constance, I just had a question, and again, it's just my opinion, but I'd push back on the idea that in-person is completely off the table. I mean, could there be a scalable version? Not that 400 people need to be all in the same room, but if it was maybe limited to a smaller group where we do maybe like a live in-person, something like this, where there is people in the room, but we're broadcasting it over Zoom or Teams. That way we do have that opportunity to showcase and highlight our diversity award winner, whether that be a person or a department. But again, I would push back. I think there's a large sentiment in the county that'd be fine showing up in person, whether we're masked or we have requirements for testing or proof of vaccination. It's just what I've heard. I've talked to a lot of people as well. It's been sorely missed. And I just asking out loud, is that completely off the table? Is that decision already been made?
Or an outdoor,
Right.
Go to Mickey Grove under the
It's
cover.
a scalable version to, great, we can't have the 400 people, I get it. There are risks involved in gathering in large numbers. However, as a scalable version, is in-person completely off the table?
Toby, that is a really good question. And I think ultimately it is the committee's decision. I will let you know, though, that in thinking of that, I did check around for a venue, and outside of doing it outdoors and finding a venue that, and your group finding a venue for it, I did at least check into a room at the Ag Center to see if there was even a viable date. And due to election activity and things of that nature, every room is booked up all the way through. Almost the only time would be I think the week before Thanksgiving, and which isn't a good time for county employees. And I think we'd be all the way into December or January. So the committee certainly can decide that and can work on finding a different venue. But if that was and I was actually looking at a scaled down version, certainly not I was, looking at at least half of that or less, but the room just wasn't there. And so if the committee wanted to take that on, you certainly could, but I think at this moment in trying to find a venue and all of that type of stuff, it might put undue pressure on the committee members to do that. And so that's why I was suggesting with that knowledge is why I was suggesting a virtual possibility, but it always rests in the hands of the committee.
Okay. And again, yeah, I understand that. I remember we used to book the Ag Center a year out in advance back so that we would always get our October date that we liked. And obviously, election year, we've had that in the past as well. It makes it increasingly difficult since that is used for other purposes as well as they book it out. But that would be my recommendation that even if I'm not part of the subcommittee, I'd be of the opinion that we would do hopefully something live virtual, maybe a hybrid where we could broadcast it still out and people could, but then that awardee, participant, and guest speaker were there, and then that way that person is able to receive the award in person.
And Toby, even that would be an alternative, and this is just, and that would be an alternative to the luncheon. And those are the things that this committee would flesh out. We're just simply, I was simply suggesting that the committee, that the group form a committee to, knowing that we're not going to have the luncheon, form a committee to discuss what those alternatives will be, whether it is finding a different venue to hold some type of outdoor event, you know, or whatever. But I do not believe that you're going to be able to have the luncheon, so to speak, the way it has traditionally been. So whatever your alternative is, I think the committee can come up with those alternatives and bring them back to the group, and that way they'll have fleshed out venues, other ideas, whether it's a luncheon, whether it's a gathering, what it entails, and that can all be voted on at the August meeting for implementation.
So then our call to action right now is we need committee members, correct? So can I get some committee members for the diversity luncheon? Aside from me, because I'm signed up already.
I'm happy to be part of that subcommittee. Point of clarification, do we need a motion to form subcommittees? We've already formed several subcommittees in this meeting, so I'm just getting concerned that we're not following bylaws.
I do not know.
Okay, we got some research to do.
Yes,
Next meeting.
indeed.
Do we have any other volunteers for
Yeah,
the?
Najal, Toby Morelli, I'll help.
Thank you. All right, well, it looks like we have a team here. So again, it's always open, and you're always open to just share ideas if things come to you. And so we'll move on to general comments. Do we have any comments from any of the advisory committee members?
Sure, why not? Never short of words. It's great to see everyone in person. I have been on this committee before where we used to meet in person every time. So it is great. I believe, you know, in a working group like this, more is accomplished in person, less distractions. So going forward, I hope this continues. I do note that the new agenda as being proposed is great. I like it. It's structured. It definitely gives us an idea of what we need to be ready for. I did notice missing was the EEO program manager report, and I know that at the moment that position is vacant, but that was something as a committee member I enjoyed hearing about, not to air our dirty laundry about complaints that we have going on, but that it gave us an idea of the tide. You know, are we seeing an increased amount of complaints? Are we seeing a decreased amount of complaints? What our training is looking like as far as, you know, is it helping? Is it hurting? The program manager report I thought was vital to the committee to hear back where we're going as a county in terms of not only the complaints, but the resolution of those as well. Because again, these things are still happening. I just noticed it wasn't on this agenda. And it may have been an oversight, but I do believe it had some value. So I'd like to see it potentially or hear why, discuss why it cannot be presented. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Toby. Do we have any comments from attendees? Hearing none, we'll move to close out and next steps. We have our next meeting. Well, our meeting's through the end of the year. August 3rd will be our next meeting, then October 5th and December 7th.
Is this a moment where we would talk about future agenda items? Well, so it sounds like we just still have a bit of specifics to work out around how we're going to do that transition for the Women's Committee. I'm not sure if we should wait all the way until next meeting, but I do think that's probably a conversation for our entire group rather than whatever subcommittee takes on their oversight. So maybe we agenda that for the August 3rd meeting. It also looks like they meet more frequently than we do. I'm not sure if it would be in this group's oversight to change their meeting schedule. we just need to think about those things. So I'm not sure if that's a future agenda item or how we want to handle that transition plan.
And Oriana, if you could send an invite out, I believe you mentioned they meet maybe
Yeah,
tomorrow.
absolutely. I'll make sure that you guys all get the invite for tomorrow's meeting. I'll get that sent out to you guys. I'll have that link forwarded to you all. And I think that when talking about the meeting structure and times, that's something that once you guys transfer it under you officially, or even in those first initial conversations, if that's a date and time that doesn't work for folks, then maybe it's opening that conversation up to that team.
Is the meeting tomorrow virtual or is it in person?
All of these meetings are held virtually because it's not a public meeting that doesn't fall under the same requirements. So these are all virtual.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you everyone for attending. It was a really good conversation, and I feel like we cleared up a lot of things, but I feel like there's more clarity. I don't know, I've been on here for quite some time, and sort of like you, Linda, have sort of felt like not 100% sure what my goal is. So I feel like we're having goals and we're setting out to accomplish those. So it's really encouraging to me. So thank you, everyone. And I will make a motion, or I'm sorry, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion?
Oh, okay, we just adjourned. Peace. So thank you all. Have a great day.
So, not.